Danish people have a global reputation of being closed off and hard to make friends with. It seems that everyone in Copenhagen and around the world has an opinion about this, but it turns out to be a lie. Sort of. So today I'm going to talk about, are Danes actually closed off? What is the difference between them and internationals like myself here in Copenhagen? What can we take from all of this? And what do you need to know if you're moving to Copenhagen or you already live here, but you want to create more connections and deeper friendships with people and actually start loving the city and build a life here? And if you make it until the end of the video, I'm going to share with you some actual tips that I've used to build my closest friendships here in Copenhagen. Okay, let's start with the million-dollar questions. Are Danes actually closed off? Have you ever heard that saying that bad questions get bad answers? Well, I think this really applies very well to this situation. It's not that Danes are closed off. The better question is, what about their history and culture led to them having a specific way of going about relationships and meeting people? And why do I perceive that as closed off? And why am I assigning that meaning to that culture? And is it helping me? Is it helping me enjoy my life here? I find it incredibly hard to group all Danes into one group of people. That's just not how the world works. What I've realized after talking to hundreds of people in the last 4 years, especially with the loneliness epidemic going on globally, which is an actual health crisis, what I have found is that because of the weather conditions of the Nordic countries, most of the socialization happens indoors. And what that led to is that the way they socialize and the way they create connection and community has happened inside in very small groups just because of where they live. So if you live in a country where, or in a region where most of the year you have very dark light and very cold conditions, you are going to adapt to that. So that their culture has naturally adapted to create a life around very close-knit communities inside. So of course, when people start moving around and traveling and we get here, we start attributing all of those qualities of how their culture socializes to the individual. So every time that we see a behavior that we perceive as closed off, we just attribute it to that person and we see it more than once. Then we make up all of this story that like, yeah, Danes are closed off and they don't want to be our friends. So to me, with any culture, not just Danes, when they have a way of being or behaving that just is very different from my own, I try to ask a question that helps me understand where that cultural norm or behavior comes from. And once it makes sense to me, I can be a lot more compassionate or just understanding and then see how I can fit into that way of living because I'm the one that made the choice to come here. And only that perspective has actually helped me to enjoy integrating into this culture and open myself up to just different ways of doing things and approach building relationships in a different way that actually feels good and that leads to a better life, better quality of life for them and for us. Okay, so now let's talk about what are the actual differences between Danes and internationals here in Copenhagen. After 4 years of living here and actually building relationships with both groups, and obviously me not being Danish, I see huge differences in one area. And that area is our relationship to money. When it comes to friendships and relationships, and as you start meeting more people and doing things with new people, like going out to eat or going to activities, it is fascinating to me how the expectations and behaviors with money and the things that people say and the way friends like to pay or don't like to pay. Most of my Danish friends, they all behave the same way, and that's very much like you pay for yourself, I pay for myself. Because now I've lived abroad for a long time, that is always like what I expect, and I'm totally fine with it. I still notice it because in my just being Mexican and just living in the United States for 3 years, the way I do it is very much like I treat you this time, you treat me next time. I'm not preaching that that should be the way. It's just how I've done it, the way I like it, but I'm never, ever, ever expecting that from other people. It's just with my close friends, that is just like the way we've done it. In Copenhagen specifically, it's always the other way, and it's not even a conversation, versus when I lived in the United States and then before that in Canada, some people did it this way, some people did it that way, and here, in my experience, it's just very separate. And I think it does make things easier. It's still weird to me after 4 years. So what can we actually take from this? If you are moving to Copenhagen, or you are thinking about moving abroad, or you live here and you're finding yourself struggling to connect, understanding that the quality of the questions that I ask is the quality of the question, the quality of my life, and the quality of the relationships, and the amount of openness that other people receive me with, if that makes sense. I don't know if that was correct English. So instead of making assumptions about Danes or about a specific culture or about a specific city, instead of saying like, why don't people want to make friends? Why don't they put in an effort? What is a higher quality question? And maybe that is, how can I maybe change the way I make assumptions about others, so when I'm starting a conversation with a new person, it doesn't come with this whole, a whole lot of baggage that people can feel. So that has been my biggest takeaway from just learning to connect with a culture that is fundamentally very different from mine, and not experiencing it in a negative way. The opposite. Now, some of my closest, most dearest friends are Danes. So this leads me to the final point that I want to make, is that what should you know if you are either moving to Copenhagen or you're already here and you want to build closer friendships and build a support system? Because if you don't have close relationships in a city, it's really hard to fall in love with a city. So if you want to fall in love with Copenhagen, here are my top 3 tips. So the first one is to join communities. This is something that I waited way too long to do. So just really understanding what is it that you already love to do, and seek out a community like a social club. And if what you're interested in is friendships and developing these deeper friendships, then Project Friendship is going to be the social club for you, and it's totally free. I'm going to drop the link below if you want to register for our next meetup. But there are tons of different communities. If Copenhagen has something, is it has communities. You just need to seek them out, and don't wait until you start feeling lonely. That would be my number 1 advice. The second is to just be ready to initiate, be ready to put in the effort, because that is one thing. Yes, I've been able to build great relationships, but it has taken a lot of me putting myself out there and actually being the one to initiate. If you're able to not see that as why aren't people just inviting me to their house just because I'm nice? It's not going to be like that. It's not going to be like that here in Copenhagen or anywhere in the world. My friends from Mexico are not going to just open up their homes to you, or their lives, not necessarily their homes, but their lives to you, if you don't make an effort. So our perspective in Mexico is if you're at a party, the person who arrives is the one that says hi. So that mentality has made it a lot easier for me, because I'm just expect to be the one initiating, putting the initial effort, and with the right people, it's going to work out. Of course, if you don't feel like that is reciprocated after a little bit, then that's just not the friendship for you. And the last thing, this is something that is not for everyone. It's just something I've done, so I want to share. So to me, the fastest path to build deeper friendships was to open up my home and host dinner parties. Of course, I understand that costs money and effort. So if it creates more stress than joy, don't do it. There's so many other things you can do. This was before I got the idea to create Project Friendship and having that third place, that social club for people. But inviting my Danish and non-Danish friends to our dinner parties here, it just allowed people to open up more. So if you enjoy it, I definitely recommend it. I've never had anyone turn down my invitation. Of course, it has to be the right people that you actually want to get to know more genuinely. I would love to hear what has been your experience in Copenhagen, or if you're not in Copenhagen, what have you heard about Danish people and making friends? If you made it all this way, I hope you enjoyed the video, and make sure that you hit the subscribe button for all things Copenhagen, making great friends, and just building a great life in this city. I will see you in the next video. Bye.